Western power rankings. We talked ad nauseum leading up to the deadline about this Western Conference arms race that was going to happen and how there were, basically 6 legitimate cup contenders in the West, 7 if you wanted to include the LA Kings as well. And they all seemed hungry to go out and make big splashes leading up to last Friday. And we kind of got that from every single team. But now that the dust is settled and we know what these rosters look like, I wanted to ask you, with the mindset of how these teams stack up in a best of 7 series and how these rosters could potentially be built to go on a long playoff run, how would you rank the teams in the West 1 through 6, 1 through 7, whatever we did?
So look, I'm appreciative of the fact that you put color to that. This is not who is the best team right now. And I just want to be clear about that. Tyler was very specific in his instructions. Night 1 of the playoffs with your roster, who's built to go. And that's where I had to put Vegas up at the top. I know they haven't played well lately. They're 3-6-1 in their last 10, but they're going to get Tomas Hertl into that lineup eventually. Noah Hannafin will settle into his role. Jack Eichel, who missed considerable time, will continue to find his game. And I just think once you bring that whole team together, and who knows, will we see Mark Stone on opening night? We really don't know the answer to that. I think the Vegas Golden Knights sit there at the top. And then it kind of runs on down through. Now, to me, Colorado was an easy number 2 here. They really were. And when I got to 3 in Dallas, this is where it got tricky. And this is where I think Winnipeg could potentially have jumped Dallas. And maybe after last night, the way I was so impressed with how they played, they should be ahead of Dallas. But this is kind of how I see it going. I think it's interesting, Tyler, that you and I have the same 3 teams at the bottom in the same order, but our first 4, while they're the same teams, are all completely out of order.
Yeah, I think it just shows you how close it is. For me, like, Dallas went out, and while they only made the one deadline move going and getting Chris Tanev, it was the only deadline move they needed. Like, they didn't go out there and just spend or add for the sake of adding. And I think what Tanev does to that blue line, the way Harley and Heiskanen have looked as a top pairing, now you have Tanev and Lindell as this true shutdown second pairing. I think that's legit. You look at the third line, Johnston, Stankoven, and Ben. Again, you want to talk about a line that could be a handful for the opposition in a best of 7 series, like the speed and youth of Johnston and Stankoven out there with Jamie Benn. That'll be legit. So I had Dallas up at the top. They also have the goaltending box checked for me with Jake Ottinger. We've seen early in his career, at least, what he can do in a best of 7 that year. He almost single-handedly beat the Flames before losing in Game 7. So that's why I have Dallas still in my number 1 spot. Winnipeg gets a big bump for me simply because of Connor Hellebuck. Vegas, I mean, listen, they've struggled to stay healthy this year, and we'll dig into Vegas a bit more with Ken Bolke, but that's kind of my concern there. Everyone just keeps assuming that Martinez and Stone will be back at one point, and who knows if that's a guarantee. I think it's probably far from it to get both of them back. But let's talk about Edmonton and Vancouver out at the bottom, and maybe we'll zero in on Vancouver real quick. They're leading the division, and yet we both put them at 6. I'd love to know your reasons as to why you have them so low, despite how good they've looked so far this season.
You know why? Because they don't play a real heavy brand of hockey. And I know they brought in Zadorov, or Zadorov, as we on Daily Faceoff sometimes refer to him as. But I just don't know how much it translates. And I also don't know how Quinn Hughes and Pedersen and Besser, these guys don't have big playoff track records. I've argued with Frank about this on my show as well, on Morning Cup of Hockey, that I believe you need to learn how to win in the playoffs by losing. I truly believe that. And, Frank challenged me on that and said that's bullshit. And why do you think that? Well, because I've seen it. And that's why I think that. And we've seen it year after year. And I look at the way they play. They're a high-flying offense. They do have big-time goaltending, but I just, look, it's unproven. And these other teams just, to me, play heavier hockey. And heavy hockey translates in the playoffs. I think it's hurt Edmonton in past playoff runs when they've got stars. The rest of their lineup not able to play that heavy hockey style. And when the game gets physical and the ice feels like it starts shrinking in the playoffs, I'm just not sold on Vancouver as a top 2 or 3 team. And look, maybe I'll be wrong, and we will find out for sure. What about you? Why you?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of a similar thing. Like, I know this is such an old school way of looking at it, but for a lot of those teams I put above them, they've won 2 or 3 playoff rounds over the last 2 or 3
don't think that's
years.
old school, by the way. I think that's reality.
And again, I look at that forward group. I know the high end, you got the Pedersen and the Miller. You went out and got a piece like Lindholm, although he hasn't exactly fit like a glove since coming to Vancouver. But I actually think that forward group, when you put it up against the Dallases, the Winnipegs, Colorados, even, it's just not quite as deep. They're deep. I'm not saying they're shallow. I'm not saying they're going to struggle to get depth scoring or anything like that. But I just don't think it's got that little extra bit of a notch that a lot of these other teams do. And I think the Canucks recognize that with the way they acted at the deadline as well. We know they were pushing to make some more forward ads. They were in a lot of conversations and it didn't work out. So I think they got enough juice in the tank or gas in the tank to sit there and hold on to that top spot in the Pacific. But, that could mean a first round matchup with right now, potentially the Vegas Golden Knights. And I expect them to climb a little bit too. Don't worry. But I think that Canucks team maybe still has some tough lessons they need to learn.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.